Have you ever found yourself lying awake long after midnight with thoughts racing through your head, replaying the same worries over and over as if your mind was stuck on repeat? The hours slip away, but peace never comes, and every attempt to quiet your thoughts only makes the noise louder. If that sounds familiar, then you are not alone. Millions of people across the Western world know the feeling of exhaustion that comes not from physical labor, but from the relentless chatter of the mind. But what if the very way you have been taught to deal with stress and anxiety is backwards? What if real peace does not come from pushing harder or solving every problem in your head, but from discovering a different way to relate to your thoughts? Imagine for a moment that there is a doorway into stillness hidden inside the noise and that you can step through it simply by listening. For over 1,000 years, Zen masters and Buddhist teachers have passed down stories that seem puzzling at first glance. They are short, often strange, and sometimes even contradictory. Yet these stories have the power to stop the spinning of the mind in an instant. They are called koans, and they were never meant to be solved like riddles. Instead, they are designed to interrupt the endless cycle of thinking and open you to a deeper awareness already alive within you. In the next few minutes, you will begin to experience this for yourself. You do not need years of training or long hours of meditation. You do not need to retreat to a monastery or study ancient languages. All you need is the willingness to set aside your usual way of listening and allow these stories to meet you right where you are. Whether you are in New York or Toronto, in London or Paris, sitting in your bedroom or driving home from a long day, there is something waiting here for you. Think of it as an invitation, not to escape your life, but to enter it more fully. The worries you carry, the uncertainties that weigh you down, the longing for rest that never seems to be answered, all of these can be transformed simply by the act of listening. Listening, in this way, is not passive. It is an act of courage, a choice to step outside the familiar struggle and taste a different kind of freedom. So as you hear these ancient voices speaking across centuries, imagine that they are speaking directly into you, not to an audience, not to a crowd, but to you in this exact moment. Their wisdom is not locked in temples or reserved for scholars. It is alive in every breath, every pause, every story that invites you to stop chasing and start receiving. Take a slow, deep breath now. Let the air fill your chest. Hold it for just a moment and then release it completely. Feel the weight drop away as you exhale. That is the beginning of the journey we are about to take together. A journey into the kind of peace that does not need to be earned because it has been here all along, waiting for you to notice. Core concept: resting in the present. The heart of these ancient teachings is surprisingly simple, yet endlessly profound. Every koan, every story, every paradox points back to one central idea: that peace is not something you chase into the future, but something you uncover in the present. It is not hidden in complicated rituals or reserved for the spiritually elite. It is here now, in the very breath you are taking, and in the awareness that is reading these words. Yet because modern life has trained us to search outside ourselves, we overlook what has been closest all along. When Zen masters spoke of resting in the present, they did not mean sitting passively with folded hands waiting for life to pass by. They were pointing to an entirely different way of experiencing reality. Imagine for a moment that your thoughts are like clouds drifting across the sky. Some are heavy and stormy, others light and playful. We spend so much of our time chasing these clouds, analyzing them, clinging to the pleasant ones and resisting the darker ones. But the sky itself never struggles. It does not become angry when clouds gather, nor does it try to hold on to them when they fade. The sky simply allows them to pass. That is what resting in the present feels like. It is becoming the sky rather than the passing weather. One of the most famous koans illustrates this with disarming simplicity. A restless monk asked Master Joshu the timeless question, "Does a dog have Buddha nature?" The monk was desperate for clarity. He wanted an answer that would fix his restless mind once and for all. Joshu looked at him and replied with a single word: mu. Number. Nothing. To an ordinary listener, this response would sound dismissive, even cruel. But to the exhausted monk, it struck like a bell. For the first time in months, his endless questioning stopped. Silence filled the space where worry had lived. The gift Joshu gave him was not an answer but a release. Think about your own life. How many times have you convinced yourself that you needed the right answer in order to relax? If only you knew what decision to make, what someone else was thinking, what the future would bring, then you could finally rest. But every answer we find only leads to another question. The cycle never ends because the real problem is not the lack of answers but the addiction to searching. Joshu's Mu is a reminder that it is possible to step off the wheel entirely. You can rest in the not knowing. You can allow mystery to be what it is without trying to tame it. Resting in the present does not mean ignoring responsibilities or pretending that problems do not exist. It means approaching them from a different state of mind. Imagine two people faced with the same difficulty. One is consumed by panic, running through every possible scenario, clenching their body and mind so tightly that even small tasks feel impossible. The other pauses, takes a breath, notices the tension in their shoulders, and gently lets it soften. They are still aware of the challenge, but they are not drowning in it. Which person is more likely to respond with clarity and creativity? The second, of course. Presence does not erase difficulty, but it transforms the way we move through it. This is why the masters taught that the present moment is enough. Because when you are anchored here in the now, you are not dragged helplessly by regrets of the past or fears of the future. Your energy is no longer scattered across timelines you cannot control. It is gathered here, where real choices can be made. In Western culture, we are trained from childhood to measure success by constant striving. We rush to the next milestone, the next promotion, the next achievement. But this forward lean comes at a cost. We miss the only place where life actually happens. We miss now. A koan told by Master Gut reveals this truth in a startling way. Whenever seekers arrived with complex spiritual questions, Gut simply raised one finger toward the sky. At first, this seemed like a meaningless gesture. Yet over time, visitors realized that the finger was not the answer but the pointing itself. He was reminding them to look not at concepts but at what was immediately present. A young attendant tried to copy his master, raising his finger in imitation. One day, Gute cut off the boy's finger. When the boy cried out in shock, the master called his name. The boy turned around, and in that moment, Gut raised his own finger again. Suddenly, the boy understood. The gesture was not about the finger at all. It was about the presence behind it. For the rest of his life, the boy lived with an awareness that every action, sweeping the floor, pouring tea, listening to a friend, could be a pointing toward truth. This story may sound extreme to modern ears, yet it speaks directly to a common experience. How often do we copy what others do without embodying the spirit behind it? We recite affirmations without meaning them. We attend classes or follow wellness routines not out of real presence but out of habit or fear of missing out. The lesson of Gute's finger is that form without spirit is empty. True presence is not in the gesture itself, but in the depth of awareness behind it. Resting in the present also asks us to face impossible situations without running away. Master Kyogen once described a man hanging by his teeth from a branch over a cliff. If he opens his mouth to answer a question, he falls to his death. If he stays silent, he fails to help another person. What should he do? The students were horrified by this paradox. Yet the koan is not a puzzle to solve, but an invitation to recognize the moments in our own lives when every option feels impossible. Perhaps it is choosing between financial stability and personal fulfillment, or between honesty and the risk of losing someone we love. Kyogen's story tells us that peace is not found in escaping the dilemma, but in breathing within it. Sometimes the most courageous act is to admit you do not know what to do, and to rest in that space of humility until the next step reveals itself. This teaching resonates deeply with audiences today, especially in Europe and North America, where so many people face crossroads in career, relationships, and identity. The pressure to always know the right move leads to exhaustion, but the wisdom of resting in the present offers a new path. You do not need to have the final answer in order to live fully. You need only to bring your whole awareness to this moment of not knowing. From that fertile ground, new possibilities emerge. Another story sharpens this point through ordinary simplicity. A novice monk, eager for enlightenment, asked Joshu for guidance. Joshu replied, "Have you eaten your rice porridge? Then wash your bowl." At first, this sounded trivial. The monk expected a secret formula or advanced technique, not instructions about breakfast dishes. Yet in that moment he glimpsed a radical truth. Enlightenment is not hidden in extraordinary experiences. It is revealed in giving full presence to the most ordinary tasks. Washing the bowl became sacred when done with total attention. Years later, as a teacher himself, the monk would pass on this lesson to others, reminding them that no act is too small to carry the weight of awakening. Consider your own routines. Do you rush through emails, meals, conversations without presence, believing the real life is waiting somewhere else? Do you postpone peace until the weekend, the vacation, or retirement? What if washing your dishes, answering your emails, or walking your dog could be holy acts when performed with awareness? This is what resting in the present means. It transforms daily life into a field of practice, where every action becomes an opportunity to touch peace. Resting in the present is also about meeting yourself as you are, not as you think you should be. Western culture often teaches that worth must be earned through achievement or self-improvement. Yet the masters remind us that what you seek is already here. One story tells of a student who asked about an ancient Buddha who meditated for 10 cosmic cycles, but still failed to reach enlightenment. "How is this possible?" he asked. Joshu replied, "Because he was trying to become a Buddha. The seeking itself blocked the finding." This points to a truth that can be unsettling yet liberating. The peace you are chasing cannot be caught, because it is the very awareness doing the chasing. Like looking for your glasses while they are on your head, you search outside for what has never been missing. To rest in the present is to see that you are not broken, not incomplete, not lacking some mystical peace. You are already the awareness in which all experiences come and go. Anxiety arises and passes. Joy arises and passes. None of these define you. You are the space that holds them. This recognition dissolves the exhausting need to constantly improve or fix yourself. Growth will still happen, but it will be natural, like a flower blooming in its own season rather than forced through endless striving. When you rest in the present, something remarkable happens. Decisions become clearer because you are no longer clouded by panic. Relationships deepen because you are actually listening rather than rehearsing your responses. Ordinary tasks bring satisfaction because you are fully engaged instead of distracted. And most importantly, the weight of needing life to be different lifts from your shoulders. You begin to experience freedom not as a distant goal, but as the quiet ease of being alive in this very moment. This is the core concept, the living heart of all the stories that follow. Resting in the present is not about renouncing the world or mastering esoteric practices. It is about returning again and again to what has always been here, your own immediate awareness. It is an invitation to stop running and notice that you have already arrived. The masters called it Buddha nature. Zen called it suchness. Modern psychology might call it mindfulness, but the essence is the same. Peace is not hidden. It is present. It is available now. All that is required is the courage to stop searching long enough to feel it. Illustrative stories, koans becoming daily life. The heart of Zen wisdom has always been hidden inside the simplest of stories. These koans are not meant to be solved in the way we solve puzzles. They are more like mirrors reflecting back the restless movement of the mind so we can see it clearly and then release it. When told in the right moment, a koan has the power to shift perception in an instant. What seems ordinary suddenly reveals a door into freedom. One of the most well-known is the story of the finger pointing to the moon. A master was teaching his students about the truth of awakening. To help them understand, he pointed toward the shining full moon above the mountain. Some of the students gazed at his finger, analyzing the gesture, debating its meaning, and missing the brilliance in the sky. The master said, "Do not mistake the finger for the moon. What I am pointing to is beyond the gesture. The truth of awakening is like the moon itself. The teachings, the rituals, the very words you are hearing now are only fingers pointing the way." This story speaks powerfully to us in modern times. How often do we mistake the finger for the moon in our own lives? We cling to methods, routines, and self-help formulas as if they are the truth itself. We scroll through endless tips on productivity, spirituality, or wellness, and forget to look at the living experience they are pointing toward. Presence, compassion, freedom, these are the moon. Techniques are only fingers. The koan reminds us not to worship the method, but to let it guide us to direct experience. Another story pulls us into the raw tension of impossible choice. A monk once asked his teacher, What happens when a person hangs from a branch high over a cliff, holding on only by his teeth? If another traveler asks him about the truth of Zen, how should he reply? If he speaks, he falls. If he remains silent, he withholds wisdom. The koan is deliberately impossible. It presents a scenario where every option leads to loss. Yet the lesson is not about choosing correctly. It is about recognizing the futility of the restless mind that demands an answer to every question. In life, there are moments when words cannot capture truth, when action is impossible and only presence remains. To rest in that presence is itself the answer. Think of the dilemmas in your own life. Perhaps you are torn between two paths, both carrying risk and both carrying possibility. The mind frantically tries to calculate the right move, but each scenario leads to doubt. The koan of the man on the branch shows us that wisdom does not always appear as a neat solution. Sometimes it emerges from surrendering the need for certainty and allowing silence to hold the paradox. There is also the deceptively simple koan of washing the bowl. A student eager for enlightenment approached Master Joshu. He asked for guidance, expecting perhaps a mantra or a profound teaching. Instead, Joshu asked him, "Have you eaten your rice porridge?" The student replied, "Yes." Then Joshu said, "Wash your bowl." That was the entire teaching. On the surface, it sounded mundane, even dismissive, but the student suddenly realized that enlightenment is not hidden in extraordinary moments. It is discovered in ordinary actions done with full presence. Washing a bowl can be as holy as prayer when it is done with complete attention. This lesson carries immense relevance for Western audiences today. Many people chase spiritual highs or dramatic breakthroughs, hoping for a single moment that will erase all confusion. Yet the wisdom of Joshu whispers that the breakthrough is already here in the small acts of daily life. Cooking dinner, folding laundry, sending an email, each can be a gateway into awareness if approached with presence. The miracle is not in escaping life, but in inhabiting it fully. Another koan brings us face to face with the nature of perception itself. A group of monks were arguing about a flag waving in the wind. One said, "The flag is moving." Another insisted, "The wind is moving." A third declared, "No, it is your mind that is moving." At that moment, the teacher appeared and confirmed the third view. What they were experiencing was not about flag or wind, but about perception itself. Our minds are constantly projecting movement, meaning, and story onto the world. The koan reminds us that the restlessness we see outside is often a reflection of our own inner turbulence. This story resonates strongly in an age of constant media and distraction. News feeds, notifications, and endless arguments create the illusion that the world is in perpetual crisis. Yet often the greatest turmoil is not outside, but within the mind that consumes it all. By recognizing this, we can step back, breathe, and notice that peace is always available when we return to awareness itself. Consider also the story of the empty wheel. A student once asked why a master spoke so often about nothingness. The master replied, "Look at a wheel. Without the empty space at its center, the spokes and rim would be useless. The emptiness is what makes it function." In the same way, the silent space inside us is not a void to fear, but the foundation of everything meaningful. Without stillness, our activity is scattered and frantic. With stillness, even ordinary life flows with ease. Western culture often fears emptiness, equating it with boredom, loneliness, or lack of purpose. But the koan of the wheel reminds us that emptiness is not absence, it is possibility. It is the open space from which creativity, love, and clarity emerge. In our crowded lives, creating space is not indulgence but necessity. The pause between breaths, the silence after a question, the blank canvas before the first brush stroke, all of these are forms of emptiness that allow life to unfold. Koans also highlight how easily we trap ourselves in expectations. A traveling monk once asked a woman who ran a small tea house for directions to a temple. She pointed down the road, but later he discovered she had misled him intentionally. Outraged, he confronted her, but she only laughed and said, "If you were truly awake, you would not have been fooled." At first, this sounds harsh, but the deeper lesson is that awakening is not about trusting every word or ritual, but about cultivating direct awareness. Even deception can become a teacher when it shatters the illusion of blind faith. For us today, the story reminds us to question what we are told by culture, media, and even spiritual traditions. Blind acceptance keeps us asleep. True wisdom grows from direct seeing, from testing teachings in the fire of our own experience. In a world filled with opinions and information, the ability to pause and ask, "Is this true in my experience?" is an act of freedom. What ties all these stories together is their power to strip away the layers of striving and reveal the living present. Whether it is the finger pointing to the moon, the man hanging from the branch, the instruction to wash the bowl, or the argument about the flag, each koan stops the restless mind and opens the heart. Each story whispers that awakening is not somewhere else or someday later. It is right here in the act of listening, breathing, seeing, and being. When we let these koans sink in, they begin to reshape how we see ordinary life. A walk in the park becomes a lesson in impermanence, as leaves fall silently from the trees. A conversation with a friend becomes a practice in presence when we stop rehearsing responses and simply listen. Even a moment of frustration in traffic can become a reminder of the moving flag that shows us it is not the cars but our own mind that is restless. This is how Zen stories move from philosophy into lived reality. They are not entertainment or abstract riddles. They are invitations. Each one is a mirror showing us where we are caught and a doorway leading us back to freedom. And when we begin to live with that awareness, daily life itself becomes the practice. The kitchen becomes a temple, the office becomes a meditation hall, and every encounter becomes a koan, calling us to wake up. To rest in the present is to realize that the stories themselves are not the final destination. They are fingers pointing. The true moon is the clarity and ease that arise when we see through the story and return to what island. This is why Zen teachers often laughed when asked for explanations. They knew that the greatest truth cannot be explained. It can only be lived. And so, as we move deeper into these teachings, remember that each koan is more than a tale from the past. It is a mirror of your own life. Each paradox is a chance to pause. Each story is an opening. If you let them, they will reshape how you move through the world. Not by giving you answers, but by showing you the freedom that has been here all along. Deeper layers of philosophy, karma, emptiness, and change. As we journey deeper into these teachings, the stories begin to reveal truths that move beyond the surface of everyday life. At first, the koans invite us to pay attention to the present moment. They remind us that peace can be discovered in simple acts, like washing a bowl or breathing fully. But beneath these everyday lessons lies a profound philosophical foundation. Zen and Buddhist masters were not only concerned with calming restless minds, they were pointing toward the very nature of reality itself, teaching that our suffering arises from misunderstanding the way life truly works. One of the most striking koans tells of a master who was once asked about the fate of an enlightened being. Does an awakened person transcend the law of cause and effect? The master replied with a story of an old monk who, despite his wisdom, had answered incorrectly when asked the same question. Because of his mistake, the monk was reborn 500 times as a fox. The message is clear. Not even enlightenment frees one from the law of karma. Understanding this is essential because it reshapes how we see responsibility. Karma is often misunderstood in the West as a kind of punishment or cosmic scoreboard. In truth, it is simply the recognition that actions have consequences. Every choice plants a seed, and each seed eventually bears fruit. An awakened person does not escape this truth but lives in harmony with it. In daily life, this means that peace does not come from denying responsibility but from embracing it fully. Each word we speak, each thought we nourish, each action we take, shapes the texture of our future. When we see this clearly, mindfulness is no longer optional. It becomes the natural response to a life that is constantly unfolding from the seeds we plant. The koan of the fox also points to the subtle danger of seeking shortcuts. Many people hope that spiritual practice will remove them from the ordinary laws of life. They believe awakening means escaping pain or floating above responsibility. But the story reminds us that true wisdom is not about leaving life behind, but about entering it more honestly. Enlightenment is not freedom from karma, but freedom within it. It is learning to live so skillfully that even the fruits of our actions nourish growth rather than suffering. Another teaching reveals the importance of emptiness. A student once asked why masters spoke so often of nothingness. The master pointed to the wheel of a cart. Without the empty space at its center, the spokes and rim would be useless. It is the emptiness that makes the wheel functional. In the same way, the space within us, the quiet that often feels like nothing, is in fact the foundation of everything. This truth challenges the modern Western mindset, which often equates value with fullness. We fill our calendars, our closets, and our minds believing that more means better. Silence is treated as awkward emptiness, as failure. Yet the wisdom of the wheel tells us that the opposite is true. Without space, there can be no movement. Without silence, there can be no music. Without rest, there can be no creativity. The emptiness we fear is not a void to be avoided, but a doorway into possibility. Think about your own life. How often do you avoid stillness by filling every free moment with noise and distraction? The phone comes out the moment boredom arises. Television runs in the background even when no one is watching. Yet in doing so, we miss the living heart of experience. The koan of the wheel reminds us to honor the spaces, the pauses, the silences. They are not empty of value. They are what allow life to breathe. Another layer of philosophy emerges in the story of the flag and the wind. Two monks stood arguing about which was moving. One said the flag was moving. The other said the wind was moving. Their teacher arrived and said, "No, it is your mind that is moving." At first glance, this seems puzzling, but it points to a fundamental truth. Reality is shaped not only by what is outside, but by the state of the mind that perceives it. This teaching is profoundly relevant in the age of constant media and relentless information. Our minds are bombarded with images and headlines that stir fear, anger, or despair. We believe we are responding to the world as it island, but often what we are responding to is the movement of our own minds as they interpret events. One person sees a challenge and feels energized. Another sees the same challenge and collapses in anxiety. The difference is not the event, but the state of mind. The koan of the flag invites us to see that peace arises not from controlling external conditions, but from calming the movement within. The Buddha expressed this principle in the doctrine of impermanence. Everything is in constant motion. Thoughts arise and dissolve. Emotions surge and fade. Circumstances change before we can grasp them. Our suffering comes not from change itself, but from the illusion that things can be made permanent. We cling to joy, trying to hold it forever, and it slips through our fingers. We resist pain, believing it will last eternally, and in doing so, we prolong it. The teaching of impermanence liberates us from this cycle. It reminds us that no matter how heavy the moment feels, it is already shifting. There is a story of a merchant whose cart broke down on a mountain road. His goods were scattered, his livelihood in danger, his future uncertain. In despair, he cried that his life was ruined. The master serving him tea pointed to the stream outside the window and asked, "Is this the same water that was here yesterday?" The merchant replied, "Of course not, the water flows." The master smiled and said, "And yet you believe your life is frozen in place." This simple story transformed the merchant. He realized that his suffering did not come from the broken cart, but from the belief that his misfortune would last forever. For those of us in the modern West, this story carries enormous weight. Economic downturns, personal losses, unexpected illness, all can feel like permanent traps. Yet the wisdom of impermanence offers comfort. Nothing lasts forever. Not our joys, not our sorrows, not even the version of ourselves we cling to. When we embrace this truth, we begin to see that every ending also carries the seed of a new beginning. The deeper layer here is that impermanence is not a threat, but a gift. Without change, growth would be impossible. Without endings, there could be no beginnings. The very instability we fear is what allows life to evolve. When we stop resisting change and begin to flow with it, we discover a freedom that is unshaken by circumstances. This is not passive resignation, but active participation. It is learning to sail with the wind rather than fight against it. Together, these teachings on karma, emptiness, and impermanence form the foundation of Zen wisdom. They remind us that life is interconnected, that responsibility is real, that silence is fertile, and that change is inevitable. The modern Western mind often seeks stability by controlling outcomes, but the masters show us another way. Stability comes not from clinging, but from learning to dance with life as it unfolds. Imagine a musician playing a jazz improvisation. Each note is influenced by the ones before, yet the music is alive only because of the spaces, the pauses, the unexpected changes. Life is much the same. Karma provides the rhythm of cause and effect. Emptiness provides the space where creativity emerges. Impermanence provides the constant motion that keeps the music alive. When we see life this way, our struggles begin to soften. We realize we do not have to control every note. We need only to listen and respond with presence. These deeper layers of philosophy are not meant to remain as abstract concepts. They are guides for living. To honor karma is to live responsibly, knowing that our choices ripple outward. To honor emptiness is to create space in our days for silence and rest. To honor impermanence is to hold joy lightly and pain gently, knowing both will pass. This way of living does not promise a life free of difficulty, but it does promise a life of freedom even within difficulty. As you sit with these teachings, notice what arises in you. Perhaps a resistance to the idea of impermanence. Perhaps relief at the thought that pain will not last forever. Perhaps curiosity about the role of silence in your own life. Whatever you feel, let it be part of the practice. Do not rush to conclusions. Simply rest with the stories, the images, the metaphors. Let them echo inside until their meaning unfolds naturally. For the Master's wisdom was never about memorizing doctrines. It was about living so deeply that every action reflected truth. The fox reborn for 500 lifetimes reminds us to live responsibly. The empty wheel reminds us to value silence. The flag in the wind reminds us to notice the movement of our own minds. The broken cart reminds us to trust the flow of impermanence. Together they form a map, not of escape, but of return. A return to life as it truly island. Paradoxes and contradictions. The wisdom of not knowing. As we move further into the heart of Zen teachings, we encounter a landscape filled with paradoxes. These are not puzzles to be solved by logic, but invitations to step beyond logic altogether. The Masters knew that the mind loves to categorize, to split reality into neat boxes of right and wrong, true and false. Yet life itself rarely fits into such boxes. The paradox is a tool, a way of shaking the mind free from its habits so that a deeper kind of wisdom can emerge. One of the most famous paradoxes is the statement, "Mind is Buddha." At first, this seems clear. It points to the idea that our very consciousness is sacred, that enlightenment is not outside of us, but within. Yet in the next breath, another master will declare, "Mind is not Buddha." To the logical mind, this is contradiction. How can both be true? The point is not to resolve the contradiction, but to rest within it. Both statements are fingers pointing beyond themselves. Both are meant to prevent the student from clinging to any single idea. This way of teaching can be unsettling for audiences trained in the Western tradition of reason. In Europe and North America, we are raised to value clear definitions and precise explanations. We want proof data consistency. Zen paradoxes cut across this expectation. They refuse to provide final answers. But this refusal is not cruelty. It is compassion. It is a way of saving us from the trap of believing that ultimate truth can be packaged into words. Another story illustrates this well. A student approached a teacher with great eagerness. He had heard of the profound statement that everything is Buddha. So he asked directly, "Is the mind truly Buddha?" The teacher answered number. Confused and a little offended, the student asked again, "How can it not be Buddha if everyone says it is?" The teacher smiled and said, "Because the moment you cling to that idea, it becomes false." This paradox teaches that even noble truths can become obstacles when we cling to them. Believing that the mind is Buddha can inflate the ego or trap us in complacency. Denying it altogether can lead to despair. The wisdom lies in refusing both extremes. To live in paradox is to live with openness, to remain curious rather than certain, to hold ideas lightly rather than grasping them tightly. There is also the story of the old woman who owned a tea house near a temple. A traveling monk came by each day asking for directions to the temple. The woman pointed him down the road, but when the monk returned having lost his way, she laughed and called him foolish. "If you were awake," she said, "you would not be deceived by my words." At first, this sounds like mockery, but the deeper lesson is that even good words can mislead if we take them too literally. The paradox is that the very path we seek may appear through error and confusion. Sometimes, being misled is the only way to learn to trust direct experience. For modern audiences, this speaks to the flood of information that surrounds us. We are given endless advice on how to live, what to buy, who to trust. Some of it may be wise. Some of it may be false, but even wisdom repeated too often can become hollow. The lesson of the tea house woman is to question everything, not in cynicism but in awareness, to see words as tools, not as final truth. Zen masters often used paradox as a mirror to reflect the student's own attachments. A monk once asked, "What is the Buddha?" The master replied, 3 pounds of flax. To the puzzled monk, this seemed absurd. What does cloth have to do with enlightenment? The paradox here is deliberate. By linking the highest spiritual ideal to something as ordinary as flax, the master shattered the student's assumption that wisdom must be lofty or mysterious. Truth is woven into the fabric of the everyday. The paradox is that enlightenment is both the most profound and the most ordinary experience. The Western mind often struggles with this because we are trained to equate value with difficulty. We believe that the more complicated or hidden something is, the more worthwhile it must be. Yet Zen reminds us that the opposite is often true. The simplest acts like eating rice or sweeping the floor can reveal the deepest truths if approached with presence. The paradox is that the extraordinary hides within the ordinary. Paradox also teaches us about the nature of identity. In one koan, a monk named Seijo dreamed she had become 2 people. When she awoke, she was deeply troubled. Was she one person or 2? Was the dream her real self or the waking self? The teacher responded by saying both are Seijo. The paradox here is that we are never fixed as one self. We are many versions of ourselves across time and circumstance. Each is valid. None is final. In our modern lives, this paradox is especially powerful. Many people in the West struggle with the pressure to maintain a consistent identity. We curate our social media profiles, polish our resumes, and present a version of ourselves that seems stable. Yet inside, we know we are shifting beings. We are joyful in one moment and angry in the next, confident today and uncertain tomorrow. The paradox of Seijo reminds us that identity is fluid. We do not need to be imprisoned by the demand for consistency. We can honor all the versions of ourselves as passing expressions of the larger awareness that holds them. Another famous paradox comes from the question, "What was your face before your parents were born?" The mind immediately tries to answer. It imagines ancestry, genetics, or cosmic ideas, but none of these resolve the koan. The paradox is designed to collapse the very framework of thinking. It pushes us into a space where words fail and only direct awareness remains. The question is not meant to be answered but to be lived. It points to the timeless awareness beyond birth and death, the face that does not change even as the body does. For audiences in North America and Europe, such paradoxes may feel impractical at first. They do not offer step-by-step guidance or quick solutions, yet their value lies precisely in this refusal. They challenge the modern obsession with certainty. They remind us that life's deepest truths cannot be downloaded or explained away. They must be encountered. They must be experienced directly. Paradox is also an antidote to arrogance. When we believe we know, we stop listening. When we accept that we do not know, curiosity returns. Zen masters used paradoxes to keep students from resting too comfortably in any conclusion. Each time a student thought he had grasped the truth, the master would present another contradiction, forcing him to let go again. The wisdom of not knowing is not weakness. It is strength. It keeps the heart open, the mind flexible, and the spirit humble. In the Western world, where certainty is often equated with success, embracing not knowing is revolutionary. It allows us to admit when we are uncertain in relationships, in careers, in politics. It allows us to live with questions rather than rushing to simplistic answers. And in that openness, new possibilities appear. Creativity flourishes, compassion deepens, and wisdom grows. The wisdom of paradox is not about confusion. It is about liberation. It frees us from the tyranny of having to pin down reality with words. It frees us from the illusion that life can be controlled or explained completely. And it frees us to live with freshness, meeting each moment without the burden of rigid certainty. So as you sit with these contradictions, let them work on you. Do not hurry to understand. Do not demand resolution. Simply allow the paradoxes to echo inside. Notice how your mind wants to grasp, and notice what happens when you stop grasping. In that space of not knowing, a deeper clarity begins to shine. The paradoxes of Zen are like gates. They do not open by force. They open when you stop pushing and simply step into the space they reveal. To live with paradox is to live awake. It is to see that truth is not fixed, that life is not static, that wisdom is not about certainty but about presence. This is the wisdom of not knowing, and it may be the most profound wisdom of all. Everyday examples. Awakening in small acts. Zen wisdom does not live only in temples or meditation halls. Its heartbeat is found in the simplest of moments, in the small acts that shape our days. The masters often taught by pointing directly to ordinary tasks, reminding students that the sacred is not separate from the mundane. To awaken is not to escape daily life, but to see it clearly, to meet it with presence, and to let even the most ordinary actions become gates to freedom. One of the clearest teachings comes from the koan of 3 pounds of flax. A student once asked his master, "What is Buddha?" The teacher replied, 3 pounds of flax." The answer startled the student. He expected something lofty or mysterious, but instead he received an answer rooted in the marketplace, in everyday commerce. The lesson was profound. Enlightenment is not elsewhere. It is right here in the fabric of daily life. The thread in your hands, the weight of your work, the conversations you have each day, all of these are where awakening lives. This story strikes a chord in modern life. We often imagine spiritual awakening as something that requires a retreat into the wilderness or a journey to sacred sites. Yet the wisdom of the flax says otherwise. You do not need to leave your home to find peace. Washing the dishes can be your temple. Driving to work can be your meditation. Folding laundry can be your prayer. The invitation is simple yet demanding. Pay attention. Bring your whole self to the moment in front of you. Another koan tells of a monk who struck the temple drum at the wrong hour. Instead of being scolded, he was praised. The mistake became a doorway. The master explained that in that moment the monk revealed his natural spontaneity, unbound by rigid rules. The teaching is subtle. Perfection is not the path. Presence island. Sometimes our mistakes show us more than our successes because they reveal where our attention truly lies. For those of us in the West, this can feel liberating. We live under constant pressure to perform flawlessly, to present ourselves as polished and controlled. Yet Zen reminds us that mistakes are not failures, they are opportunities. When we bring awareness even to our errors, we discover freedom. The paradox is that being fully present in our imperfection brings us closer to truth than chasing a hollow ideal of perfection ever could. Consider also the story of the water jar. A monk asked his teacher what the essence of Zen was. The teacher pointed to a jar of water. The monk pressed for more, but the teacher insisted. The jar is the teaching. What could this mean? To the student it was puzzling. Yet the message is simple. Objects, moments, and actions are not symbols pointing elsewhere. They are themselves complete expressions of reality. To look for meaning outside the moment is to miss the truth that is already shining within it. This lesson has great power in a culture that constantly seeks more. We are trained to search for deeper meanings, hidden insights, or life-changing secrets. But Zen whispers that what you are seeking is already here. The taste of your morning coffee, the sound of birds in the distance, the sensation of breath moving through your body. All of these are teachings. They do not need interpretation. They only need your presence. Another story tells of a monk who asked for guidance after eating. The master told him simply, "Wash your bowl." On the surface, this sounds like housekeeping advice, yet its depth lies in its simplicity. Every action is complete when performed with care. Eating is finished by washing the bowl. The act itself becomes a form of awakening when done with attention. For modern listeners, this story is both comforting and challenging. Comforting because it tells us that enlightenment is not locked away in mystical practices. Challenging because it demands we stop running from the present moment. It is easier to dream about future transformation than to bring full awareness to washing a dish. Yet the truth is that awakening happens precisely there, in the small and repeated acts of ordinary life. Zen stories also reveal the wisdom hidden in fatigue and frustration. One master asked a weary student what he was doing. The student sighed, "I am carrying this heavy load." The master simply replied, "Put it down." The student realized that the weight was not only on his shoulders, but in his mind. Much of our suffering comes not from the task itself, but from the story we tell about it. When we put down the story, the task becomes lighter. For those living in fast-paced Western societies, this teaching speaks directly. Workloads, family responsibilities, financial struggles, all can feel crushing. Yet part of the weight is our resistance, our belief that life should be different. The Koan teaches that sometimes the path is not to fight harder, but to release our grip, to put down the mental burden, even if only for a breath. In that moment of release, presence returns, and with it a sense of freedom. Even the seasons became lessons for the masters. A monk once asked about the meaning of Zen. The teacher pointed to the falling leaves of autumn. No explanation was given because none was needed. The leaves falling silently carried the teaching of impermanence, of beauty, of letting go. The invitation was to see the world itself as scripture, to let nature's changes mirror our own lives. This story invites us to look differently at our own environments. In the streets of a European city or the neighborhoods of North America, the teaching is still present. The snow melting in spring, the blossoms opening in summer, the bare branches in winter all carry the same lesson. Life is not separate from us. It is teaching us constantly if we have the eyes to see. Zen also teaches through humor and play. In one story, a student asked a master about the essence of Buddhism. The master responded by putting on his sandals upside down. The student laughed, then suddenly understood. The point was that truth is not always serious. Awakening can appear in laughter, in silliness, in moments where the mind is jolted out of its rigid seriousness. For modern audiences, this is a refreshing reminder. Spirituality does not need to be solemn. It can be playful, light-hearted, even joyful. A joke told with presence can be as awakening as a profound sermon. The key is awareness, not the form it takes. All these everyday stories carry the same message. Awakening is not hidden. It is revealed in small acts, in mistakes, in ordinary objects, in the rhythm of nature, and even in laughter. The challenge is not to find enlightenment, but to notice it, to stop overlooking what has always been here. When we live with this awareness, daily life transforms. Work becomes a field of practice. Relationships become opportunities for compassion. Even our struggles become teachers. Washing a bowl, carrying a load, hearing the wind in the trees, all become sacred. This is the heart of Zen. It does not ask us to leave our lives, but to enter them more fully. Imagine bringing this perspective into your own life. The next time you stand at the sink, feel the warmth of the water. Notice the movements of your hands. Hear the sounds around you. In that moment, you are practicing the same wisdom that has been handed down for centuries. You are not waiting for enlightenment. You are living it. The everyday examples show us that the path is not about adding more, but about paying attention. It is about peeling back distraction and meeting life directly. Every step, every breath, every action can be a doorway. The question is whether we are willing to walk through. As we move forward into the teachings on compassion and letting go, remember that each koan is not separate from your own story. The master pointing to flax, the monk beating the drum at the wrong time, the teacher pointing to a water jar. Each of them is pointing to your life. The invitation is to live with presence, to let the small acts of your day reveal the vast truth of existence. In this way, the ordinary becomes extraordinary, and awakening is no longer a distant dream, but the living reality of each moment. Letting go and acceptance, the power of release. If there is a thread that ties all Zen teachings together, it is the call to let go. The koans and paradoxes shake the mind not to confuse us, but to loosen our grip on what we think we know. At the heart of this tradition is the recognition that much of our suffering comes not from life itself, but from our resistance to it. We clutch our ideas, our possessions, our identities, and our illusions, as if holding on tightly could protect us from change. Yet life keeps moving. The invitation of Zen is to discover the strength that comes not from clinging, but from releasing. A well-known koan illustrates this truth in a vivid way. A master once spoke of a buffalo passing through a fence. Its head, horns, and even its massive body all make it through, but the tail becomes stuck. Students puzzled over this image for years. How could the largest parts of the animal pass freely while the smallest detail remained trapped? The teaching points to the subtle ways. Attachment lingers, even when we believe we have transcended it. We may release many things, but if even the smallest part of the self remains caught, freedom is incomplete. This story resonates with our modern lives. We might give up material comforts to pursue a simpler way of living, but still cling to the desire for recognition. We might release a toxic relationship but hold tightly to resentment. We might meditate daily yet secretly nourish pride in our practice. The buffalo's tail reminds us that true letting go is radical. It asks us to examine not only the obvious attachments but also the subtle ones hidden in the corners of the heart. Another koan tells of Seijo, a woman who dreamt she had become two people. When she woke, she was distraught. Was she one or two? Which self was the real one? The teacher told her that both were Seijo. The teaching is clear. We are never one fixed identity. We carry many versions of ourselves: the child, the parent, the dreamer, the worker, the doubter, the believer. To cling to one version is to deny the others. Letting go here means accepting the fullness of who we are, even when it feels contradictory. This lesson is powerful for Western audiences, where identity is often treated as a project to be perfected and defended. We are taught to define ourselves clearly, to present a polished version of who we are to the world. Yet inside, most people know they are not one thing. We shift from confident to insecure, from joyful to sorrowful, from strong to vulnerable. The wisdom of Seijo's dream is that none of these selves needs to be rejected. Letting go means releasing the demand to be consistent and embracing the truth that we are many things at once. There is also the famous koan of the monk carrying a heavy load. Exhausted, he complained to his master about the burden. The master simply said, "Put it down." At first, the monk thought this was about the physical load, but he soon realized the deeper meaning. The heavier burden was not the physical weight, but the mental story about it. Much of what we carry in life is not the task itself, but the resistance we add to it. Letting go often means dropping the story, not the responsibility. This truth can be transformative in a culture where stress is worn like a badge of honor. People in Europe and North America often define themselves by how busy they are, by how much they carry. Yet the teaching of the heavy load reminds us that freedom does not come from doing less or doing more, but from shifting how we relate to what we do. When we put down the mental weight of resistance, even difficult tasks become lighter. Nature itself often became a teacher of letting go. One master, when asked about the essence of Zen, simply pointed to the blossoms falling from a cherry tree. The petals drifted silently to the ground, beautiful in their release. The teaching was wordless yet complete. Everything in life blooms and fades. To cling is to suffer. To let go is to honor the natural cycle. This story speaks deeply to Western audiences who often fear aging, loss, and death. The culture of youth and achievement can make the natural cycles of life feel like failures. Yet the cherry blossoms remind us that falling is not failing. It is part of the beauty. To let go of youth, to let go of control, to let go of certainty, is to step into the larger rhythm of life itself. Another story tells of a master who once held up a priceless porcelain cup. Without warning, he dropped it and it shattered on the floor. His students gasped in horror. The master looked at them calmly and asked, "Are you suffering because the cup is broken, or because you believed it would last forever?" The lesson is unforgettable. All things break, all things pass. Suffering comes not from the loss itself, but from the illusion of permanence. This koan has powerful relevance in today's world where possessions are treasured and loss is dreaded. It teaches that we can enjoy beauty without needing it to last forever. We can love fully without demanding eternity. We can live richly without clinging to permanence. Letting go means holding life with open hands, receiving and releasing with equal grace. Letting go is not only about possessions or circumstances, but also about control. One master spoke of a man hanging from a branch by his teeth. If he opens his mouth to answer a question, he falls. If he stays silent, he fails to help. The image is impossible. Yet that is the point. It reveals the futility of our desperate attempts to control outcomes. Sometimes the wisest act is to release the illusion of control and rest in the reality of the moment. For Western seekers, this teaching challenges the cultural obsession with mastery and dominance. We are taught to believe that with enough effort and planning, we can control everything. Yet life often defies control. Illness comes, relationships end, economies shift. The image of the man hanging from the branch reminds us that freedom does not come from solving every dilemma, but from surrendering to the flow of life. Letting go also means embracing impermanence in relationships. A story tells of Kisa Gotami, a mother who lost her child. In her grief, she begged the Buddha for medicine to bring him back. The Buddha told her to find a mustard seed from a household untouched by death. She searched every home but found none. At last she understood. Death touches all families. Her grief was still real, but her isolation was gone. She discovered acceptance not by denying her pain, but by recognizing its universality. This story offers solace to modern hearts. Grief is often treated as something to overcome quickly, as if strength means moving on without looking back. But Zen teaches that letting go is not forgetting. It is allowing pain to soften into compassion. It is accepting that love and loss are intertwined. In this acceptance, grief becomes not a chain but a teacher. The power of release is also seen in the life of Master Bankei. For years he pushed himself through extreme practices, fasting and meditating until he nearly died. One day, coughing blood and believing the end had come, he felt a sudden relief. At last he thought, I can stop trying so hard. In that moment of surrender, awakening arose. He realized that enlightenment was not something to be forced, but something already present when he let go of striving. This teaching carries a radical message for modern audiences. In cultures that prize ambition and endless self-improvement, it is easy to believe that peace will come only through more effort. Yet the wisdom of Bankei shows us that effort can become the very barrier. The deepest transformation often comes not from striving harder, but from releasing the struggle altogether. Letting go does not mean indifference. It does not mean apathy. It means relating to life without clinging. It means loving deeply without demanding permanence, working diligently without being enslaved by outcomes, grieving honestly without being trapped forever in sorrow. It means stepping into the flow of life rather than trying to dam the river. To practice letting go is to discover freedom in every moment. When you put down the mental weight, you have carried your shoulders soften. When you release the demand that joy last forever, you can finally enjoy it while it is here. When you stop fighting pain, you discover that it shifts and changes on its own. The power of release is not theoretical, it is practical. It changes how you breathe, how you work, how you love. Zen masters knew that human beings would resist this message. Letting go feels like weakness in a world that equates strength with control. But the paradox is clear. Only by releasing do we find true strength. Only by accepting do we find peace. Only by opening our hands do we discover that what we were holding was never truly ours to begin with. The peak of paradox, the pathless path. Every journey eventually arrives at a horizon where the path itself seems to vanish. Zen calls this the place beyond paths, where the student is asked to let go, not only of illusions, but even of the practices and teachings that once carried them forward. It is here that the wisdom of paradox shines at its brightest. The masters did not want their students to cling even to Zen. They wanted them to stand naked in the vastness of reality, with nothing left to grasp. This is what is meant by the pathless path. One of the most striking koans asks, how do you take the next step from the top of a 100-foot pole? A student who has climbed such a pole has already overcome great challenges. He has persevered, disciplined himself, and risen to extraordinary heights. But now he is stuck. To stay clinging to the pole is to remain frozen. To step forward is to fall into the unknown. The koan forces us to confront the edge of certainty. It tells us that real freedom comes not from reaching a height, but from letting go of the need for solid ground. For modern audiences, this image feels especially powerful. We are trained to climb, to achieve, to reach the top of our careers, our finances, our reputations. Yet so many discover that once they arrive at the summit, the promised peace is still missing. The view is high, but the heart remains restless. The koan whispers that the next step is not upward, but outward. It is the leap into trust, the release of the need to control what comes next. Another teaching speaks of the 3 barriers set by Master Tosotsu. To enter the gate of Zen, the student must pass 3 challenges. First, to show the true nature of the self before birth. Second, to demonstrate how to free oneself from life and death. Third, to reveal where one goes after death. These questions cannot be solved by intellect. They are impossible to answer with words, yet they are designed to bring the student face to face with the mystery that cannot be reduced to explanation. These barriers are not meant to discourage but to liberate. By failing to answer them with logic, the student is forced to abandon the need for resolution. What remains is the raw encounter with reality as its island, to face the question of life and death and realize that the answer cannot be found in thought but only in direct presence is to awaken to freedom. The pathless path is not about solving life. It is about living it fully without needing to solve it. Western culture prizes roadmaps. From early education to career planning, life is presented as a sequence of steps. Do this, then that, then the next thing. Success is seen as following the path correctly. Yet Zen undercuts this assumption. It tells us that the deepest truths emerge not from following but from stepping off the map entirely. The pathless path is not about abandoning responsibility but about realizing that the ultimate destination is not somewhere else. It is here in the living moment. Another story captures this spirit. A monk asked his teacher what enlightenment felt like. The teacher replied, "Walking on the ground, eating rice, carrying water." The student was confused. Was this not ordinary life? The master nodded. Yes, it is ordinary life. The difference is that the awakened one lives it without resistance. This is the paradox. The ultimate teaching does not lead us away from life, but directly into it, yet with a clarity that transforms everything. The pathless path is also revealed in the story of the man who finally gave up his desperate search. For years he meditated, fasted, and studied until his body and mind were exhausted. One day, coughing blood and believing he would die, he suddenly felt relieved. At last he thought, "I can stop trying so hard." In that moment of surrender, awakening appeared. What he had been chasing was already present once he let go of the chase. The paradox is clear. The more we strive to catch enlightenment, the further it runs. The moment we stop running, it finds us. This challenges a central idea of Western ambition. We are trained to believe that effort brings results, that persistence leads to achievement. In many areas of life, this is true. But in the realm of awakening, the very effort can become the barrier. The pathless path teaches that wisdom is not earned like a degree or won like a prize. It is uncovered by surrender, by stepping aside, by allowing life itself to reveal what has always been true. Another story tells of a student who asked about the essence of Zen. The master replied, "Have you finished your meal? Then wash your bowl." The lesson here is that enlightenment is not somewhere far away. It is in completing the action at hand. The pathless path is not about mystical experiences, but about bringing full presence to what is already here. Eating is complete when you wash the bowl. Life is complete when you live it as it unfolds. There is no need to reach elsewhere. This teaching speaks to audiences in Europe, America, and Canada who are often pulled in many directions by constant distraction. The pathless path offers relief. It says you do not need to be anywhere other than where you are. You do not need to master some hidden formula. You need only to be awake to the moment before you, whether it is joyful or difficult, ordinary or profound. The essence of the pathless path is summed up in an ancient saying, "Great is the matter of birth and death. Life passes swiftly. Wake up, do not waste your days." This is not a call to chase more achievements, but to see that every moment is the only path their island. To wait for enlightenment later is to miss the enlightenment available now. Living the pathless path means stepping into the paradox of effort and surrender. We still practice, still meditate, still act with compassion, but we also recognize that these actions are not ladders to climb towards some distant goal. They are expressions of the truth already present. The paradox is that we walk a path that is not a path. We move forward by realizing we have already arrived. For modern audiences, this teaching can feel both liberating and unsettling. It liberates because it removes the pressure of having to earn awakening. It unsettles because it takes away the comfort of roadmaps. Yet in that space of uncertainty lies freedom. To live without needing everything mapped out is to discover the creativity of life itself. The unknown becomes not a threat, but a friend. So the student standing at the top of the 100-foot pole faces the final choice: to cling to what has been achieved or to step into the vast air. Zen whispers that the true step is the one into nothing, into openness, into trust. This is the pathless path. It does not promise safety. It promises freedom. It does not guarantee certainty. It offers presence. When we allow ourselves to live this way, the ordinary moments of life shine with new light. Washing the bowl, walking down the street, listening to the wind in the trees, all become revelations. We discover that the path we were seeking has been under our feet the entire time. The paradox dissolves not by being solved, but by being lived. We realize that the journey was never about arriving elsewhere. It was about waking up here. This is the peak of paradox. The moment when the search ends, not because all questions are answered, but because the need for answers has fallen away. It is here that Zen becomes less a teaching and more a way of being. The pathless path is simply life itself, lived with open eyes and an open heart. Conclusion: living the teachings. As we reach the end of this journey through Zen koans and Buddhist wisdom, one truth becomes unmistakable. Every story, every paradox, every image of flags, bowls, blossoms, and buffalo has been pointing to the same realization. Awakening is not distant. Peace is not a prize to be earned. Clarity is not hidden in secret teachings. All of it is here, alive in this very moment, waiting for us to notice. The masters use stories not because they wanted to confuse us, but because they knew the mind loves to cling to explanations. A direct answer would only create another concept to hold onto. By offering paradox, they loosened our grip. By pointing to ordinary life, they reminded us that the extraordinary is hidden in plain sight. The essence of Zen is not escape but engagement. It is not about leaving the world behind, but seeing the world clearly, without the fog of resistance. For those of us living in a restless modern world, this is both a challenge and a gift. We are surrounded by distractions, driven by deadlines, pulled into constant striving. Yet the call of Zen is simple. Slow down, breathe, notice what is here. When you wash a bowl, wash the bowl. When you carry a burden, carry it without the added weight of resentment. When you laugh, laugh fully. When you grieve, grieve honestly. Presence is not complicated. It is only difficult because we are so used to running away from it. The deeper truth is that you are already whole. The awareness reading these words is not broken. It does not need to be perfected. It does not need to become someone else. The paradox is that growth happens naturally once you stop trying to force it. Like a flower that blooms in its own season, your life opens when you let it. Letting go is not weakness. It is the greatest strength. It is the courage to trust life as it unfolds. So here is the invitation. Take these teachings off the page and into your days. Practice noticing. Practice releasing. Practice meeting each moment as if it were both ordinary and sacred. You do not need to climb a mountain or enter a monastery. You do not need to solve riddles or memorize doctrines. You need only to be awake in the life you already have. Let this be the call to action. As you finish reading, pause. Feel your breath. Look around at whatever surrounds you. Allow it to be enough. Let the stories echo in your heart, not as abstract lessons, but as living reminders. The path is not somewhere else. The path is here, and with each step you take in awareness, you embody the very wisdom that has been passed down for centuries. The journey is not over because it was never about reaching the end. It was always about waking up now. So step into your life with open eyes. Trust the flow of change. Honor the silence within. Let go of what you cannot hold. And discover again and again that peace is not a distant dream. It is the ground beneath your feet in this very moment.